That's a good comparison. Tabloid journalists, there's polls, they often rank as among the least trusted people in the country.
And that's the last word. Alex Spilius of the Daily Telegraph. Thank you. The House is in session. Tom Coburn on this program on Friday. Thanks for being with us.
A communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., July 20th, 2011. I hereby appoint the Honorable Daniel Webster to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, John Boehner, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House of January 5, 2011, the Chair will now recognize members from a list submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition. The parties with each party limited to 1 hour, and each member other than the majority leader, minority leaders, and the minority whip limited to 5 minutes. But in no event will we continue past 11:50 a.m. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, we've heard the song, "This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Islands, this land was made for you and me." But we need to understand that in America, the greatest, largest landholder is Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam, the great landowner. He owns 27% of all the land in America. This poster here shows the holdings of Uncle Sam. All of the red in the United States, including Alaska, is owned by Uncle Sam. Over 50% of the land in the West is owned by Uncle Sam. Now, if we were to transfer all these acres to the East Coast, that's about the size of all of the land east of the Mississippi is owned by Uncle Sam. Looking at it another way, let's go across the seas to Europe. If you take all the land that Uncle Sam owns and superimpose it on Europe, it would include the United Kingdom, Spain, France, Switzerland, Italy, Austria, Germany, and Poland. That would be how much land Uncle Sam would own if he owned that portion of Europe. So the great landholder is none other than the federal government. The federal government owns about 27% of all the land in America, 623 million acres. And we are talking about how to increase the revenue for this country. Maybe we should do something that was thought of years ago. Ronald Reagan may not have been the first, but he did mention in the 1980s that the federal government ought to sell some of that land to Americans to help, get this, pay down the debt. This has even been talked in the White House. President Obama discussed this a couple of weeks ago of selling just one little 300-portion acre in Los Angeles that was approximately worth $2 billion. Maybe we should sell some of that. So I introduced the American Land Act that will do this. It will require that the Bureau of Land Management and the Forestry Service sell a portion of their land for the next 5 years. And that will be a decrease in total land in the United States owned by Uncle Sam to about 26%. Now, bear in mind, I want to make this clear, this does not include the national parks. This does not include the fish and wildlife services, the marshes, the coastal plains, the environmental sensitive areas. The federal government will make the decision what would be sold. Right now, in 2005, the land holdings of the United States, according to OMB, was worth about $1.1 trillion. So I think if we sold a portion of this land, it would raise revenue for the United States, about approximately $200 billion or less. Plus, it would do other things. It would put the land in the hands of Americans, and Americans would own the land, and they would pay taxes, and they could pay taxes not only to local and state government, but when they build a business or make a business, they will bring in more federal income tax. It will save the federal government the cost of maintaining ownership, and it will raise revenue and pay down the debt. Real property in the hands of real Americans. What a thought. It will create productivity and sell American land to Americans. Let Americans own more of America. Uncle Sam shouldn't prevent Americans from having a stake or a share in America. The United States owns most of the grand estate of our great country. And it's time to let more Americans own it, because this land was made for you and me. And that's just the way it is. I yield back.
Chair recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Chu, for 5 minutes.
In less than 2 weeks, on August 2nd, we must raise the debt limit or the American government will go into financial default. If we don't, it will be a disaster for the economy, and real American families will pay the price. That's why for almost 95 years we have kept our promises and paid our bills. Congress has voted to avoid economic default nearly 100 times since 1917 because it was the right thing to do. The debt limit was raised 17 times under Ronald Reagan, 4 times under Bill Clinton, and 7 times under George W. Bush. But now Republicans are shying away from their duty, spreading misinformation about the serious threat we are facing, saying there will be no impact on the average American and that it will not hurt our economy. But that's not true. Let me tell you why. If we default on our bills, the interest on all our loans would skyrocket, just as your interest rate will go up if you miss a credit card payment. And this means disaster for all American families. The median 30-year home loan would increase by almost $20,000, or 10%. This would hurt an already struggling housing market, pushing home sale prices down and potentially leaving more borrowers underwater. If we default on our bills, the stock market could plunge. An American in her 50s would lose almost $9,000 immediately from the typical 401k. The S&P 500 could lose 6.3% in value in just 3 short months. These losses would affect millions of Americans who would have fewer savings for their retirement, their supposed golden years. If we default on our bills, prices for gas, electronics, clothes, and other imported goods could dramatically increase. A U.S. default would create economic chaos, forcing the value of our dollar to decrease, making many products we use every day more expensive at a time when our household dollars are already stretched thin. We cannot let this happen, but Republican leaders in Washington are playing political games with our economic security. With 2 weeks left and the clock ticking, the time for playing childish political games should be over. Republicans should come back to the table and work with Democrats on a compromise that will avert economic catastrophe. And they should work on a compromise that doesn't hurt the most vulnerable amongst us. Seniors earn an average of only $19,000 a year. Contrast that to millionaires who, because of the Bush-era votes, are getting almost $140,000 in tax breaks from the government every year. There is no reason that our seniors and the neediest amongst us should struggle to pay their hospital and electric bills just so that we can subsidize a millionaire's yacht. Yet Republicans want to gut the programs that benefit seniors the most, Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, in exchange for their votes on the debt limit. They actually want to hold your senior years hostage just so they can make a political statement on the debt limit. We cannot balance the budget on the backs of seniors. For those who believe that the potential for default is not real, let me quote a famous president who said 25 years ago, quote, "Congress consistently brings the government on the edge of default before facing its responsibility. This brinkmanship threatens the holders of government bonds and those who rely on Social Security and veteran benefits. Interest rates would skyrocket, instability would incur in financial markets, and the federal deficit would soar," unquote. That president was Ronald Reagan, making his plea to Congress. And today, the American people are calling again on this body to do what's right. I know that if we can move past all the political posturing, we can reach a bipartisan agreement that protects Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, that reduces the debt, and that saves our economy from the disaster of default. And we must do it now.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, it was an honor to be here earlier with Congressman Ted Poe from Texas explaining about the federal lands and how they could be developed to create jobs and opportunity. It's particularly fitting that the Speaker Pro Tem at this moment is Daniel Webster, Congressman from Florida, because over his head is inscribed a statement, a very wise statement from the previous Daniel Webster, the statesman of our country. And in the inscription over the head of our Speaker Pro Tem at this moment, it says, "Let us develop the resources of our land." And so we know that the original Daniel Webster was correct, and we know that Judge Ted Poe is correct, and our Speaker Pro Tem is correct. Mr. Speaker, last night the House passed the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act of 2011. As the co-sponsor of this legislation, I am grateful to have my colleagues support this measure with bipartisan votes by Republicans and 5 Democrats. It cuts spending by $111 billion in 2012 and enacts statutes that will enforce spending caps on the federal government for the next 10 years to promote jobs. Finally, it requires passage of a balanced budget amendment in order to raise the debt limit. This positive legislation goes beyond politics and puts forth measures that address the needs our nation faces. These policies force Washington to do what families and small businesses must do every day: balance the budget. Rather than devise a plan of their own, liberals in Congress simply want to raise taxes. These taxes will harm more families and kill more jobs. As the President said in 2009, quote, "You don't raise taxes in a recession," end of quote. And of course today we have nearly 15 million unemployed persons in our country. Unemployment under the failed policies of our President have increased to 9.2%. We need to change course. Cut, Cap, and Balance is a plan I encourage the Senate to pass in order to put our country back on the path to prosperity, creating jobs. In conclusion, God bless our troops, and we will never forget September 11th and the global war on terrorism. Time.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Larson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request the opportunity to extend and revise my remarks. I want to start, first of all, about talking about the tenor of debate in this chamber. Historically, we've had great debates in this chamber. I think that the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, is an honorable man who cares deeply about this institution. And I think on both sides of the aisle, we have very intelligent people who care passionately about their beliefs. We have a nation that's in the midst of the worst recession since the Great Depression. It prevails on us as Americans to come together and face the problems that our nation is currently dealing with. You heard Representative Chu mention it earlier. Ronald Reagan did so at that time with a Democratic Speaker, Tip O'Neill. He did so by appealing to both chambers about the need to come together, facing the daunting reality of defaulting for the first time on the country's full faith and credit, and the impact that that would have on the global economy, on the nation's economy, but I dare say more importantly on one's household economies. And from my perspective as a member here and going back home and listening to our constituents, I think that's the most important thing, is their household economies that are hanging in the balance here. Washington can oftentimes provide great theater and great back and forth, but we do not want this to become the theater of the absurd as our constituents look on in the pain in agony of being out of work and wondering whether or not their government is going to be there for them. So I hope that we're able to pass a clean debt ceiling, as Ronald Reagan did 17 times, the same kind of thing that was afforded Bill Clinton and George W. Bush 7 times most recently, so that we can get on with the concerns that we care deeply about. And whether it's dealing with the national debt and dealing with the issues of spending and making cuts that will strategically grow the economy, or whether it's dealing with investing in the American people and making sure that revenues that come in do so to put America back to work, like the creation of an infrastructure bank funded by the private and public sectors working together to create those much-needed jobs, but essentially putting America back to work. I recently received a letter from one of my constituents, and I think this sums up the feeling of America. I want to read her words because they tell the story of all too many Americans. I'm worried, afraid for myself and all in my situation, and saddened. If I still have not been hired to work in the next few weeks, I will lose the financial ability to live in a room or an apartment, and will lose the parts of my life that literally had to be placed in storage. Most notably, my family photos, my deceased parents, of my children, due to the lack of income or savings to pay the rental fees. I have no one who will take me in or who can afford to do this. She went on to say, how can you not agree that this is comparable to a natural disaster when individual lives are at stake and left as if to be swallowed by an abyss of dark uncertainty? These are the people of our country who we are sworn to serve. This debate is important on the floor. The debt ceiling could be lifted tomorrow. But the pain and agony of the American people are stated more eloquently by the people who are actually suffering. And when she says to be swallowed up by an abyss of dark uncertainty, that is a moral obligation for us. And rather than talking about staying here over the weekend to make sure we deal with the debt ceiling and all the machinations that are going on between the two chambers, let's stay here till we put America back to work. That's what we should be doing, out innovating, out building, and out educating the rest of the world. I yield back my time.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Boustany, for 5 minutes. Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday we had a very vigorous debate about the unsustainable debt that our country is facing, and we passed a bill, the Cut, Cap, and Balance bill. And that bill was really the only one that's been on the table, House or Senate, so far. So we ask in the Senate, where's their proposal? We ask the White House, give us a proposal that the Congressional Budget Office can actually give us a score on how we're going to do this. We need legislative language to move forward on these things. We can't just base things on speeches, as has been said yesterday. Mr. Speaker, I believe this country is at a very pivotal point in its history. There's no question about it. We're at a pivotal point. We can decide, is the United States going to lead in the 21st century as it did in the 20th century and in the 19th century, or will we be swallowed in a sea of red ink, high unemployment, and very sluggish growth? That is the basic fundamental problem we're faced with today. And it's within our power in Congress to make policy decisions that will change this equation for the good or the bad for the American people. We have decisions to make, and it's time. Tough decisions. It's time to make those decisions. Now, yesterday we debated the unsustainable debt problem that this country is facing. a situation that is going to swallow up savings for every single American. Currently, $46,000 for every man, woman, and child in this country. And it's rising. And that doesn't count the unfunded liabilities. So the debt is clearly a problem. And we have to set the country on a sustainable path with a credible plan to move us forward. But there's another side to the problem that's not being talked about enough. And it's the fact that we are not growing this economy. We are not growing private sector jobs. And the previous speaker from Connecticut, my friend from Connecticut, talked about the plight of so many who are without jobs. We have to grow this economy if we're going to create jobs. And that means having a well-thought-out energy strategy for the United States. It means fundamental tax reform to put us on a very competitive footing, whether it's a small business or a large U.S. company. And it also means a very aggressive trade strategy for the United States. Now, I want to talk about trade for a minute because it really does not get enough discussion here in this body. I got some very encouraging news just last week from the World Trade Center of New Orleans in my home state. It released some quarterly trade figures. And in the first quarter of fiscal year 2011, exports from Louisiana manufacturers and farmers grew by almost 50% compared to the previous period last year. This is incredible news because Louisiana is rapidly transforming its economy into a global trading economy that helps our farmers, helps our manufacturers. We sell to the world. We create private sector jobs that pay better than the average jobs around the United States. 1 out of 5 jobs in Louisiana is related to international trade where we export. This is critical, and if we're going to grow this country and grow private sector jobs, we need a trade strategy in place to do this, to help it, to open markets overseas for our farmers, our manufacturers, our small businesses. We're seeing rapid growth in Asia and South America right now, all based on trade. Hundreds of trade agreements have been basically voted upon in these countries and implemented, regional trade agreements. Here in the United States, it's been 4 years and no activity. We have 3 pending agreements right now. Panama, Colombia, South Korea. 3 agreements. These will basically open markets in countries that are already having pretty much unfettered access into our market. These will create, by the President's own estimate, 250,000 jobs in this country. Those are direct jobs in the short term. That doesn't even speak to the number of jobs that will be created going forward. It is critically important that we move forward on this. $13 billion in exports from these 3 agreements alone. Exports. These are American companies, American farmers selling their goods overseas. This will stimulate growth in this economy and job creation. This is why we need to move forward on it. But there are other important aspects of this. These 3 agreements were negotiated in good faith. And so just like the full faith and credit of the United States is on the line with regard to dealing with our debt problem, our credibility internationally is on the line as to whether we're going to be a leader in this world or we're just going to sit back and shrink and see high unemployment and sluggish job growth and a lost opportunity for our children and grandchildren. That's what's at stake with this. These 3 trade agreements need to be done now. The President could easily send these to Congress, and we can vote on them. That's what we need to do. That's a step forward to restore American competitiveness, to restore American credibility, and to restore American confidence. Come on, Mr. President, lead. I yield back.
The members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair. The gentleman from New York is recognized, Mr. Rangel, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to advise of extent.
Without objection.
A previous speaker referred to our distinguished Speaker pro tem with that historic name and was suggesting that we look for something to guide us that would be over the podium. What I see is in God we trust. Not the Congress, not the House, well, not Democrats and certainly not Republicans, but In God we trust. Recently, I took this to be a very serious thing, and I was saying that in the process of increasing the debt ceiling and cutting back spending, that a lot of people were vulnerable. And I called upon our spiritual leaders not to forget them. And indeed, whether we're talking about Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid, that all of these things were going to be on the block, subject to be cut. The press said that I was calling upon Jesus to help Democrats. Well, that's not so. I was calling upon religious leaders, whether they were Christian or Protestant or Jewish or Gentile, Mormon or Muslim, to say, in God we trust, and that there comes a time when human beings, regardless of their party registration, need some help in deciding the crucial issues that actually affect the lives of people. And whether we're talking about peace or war with thousands of people being killed, no one can deny that this is a spiritual issue if we were asked whether we support it or not, but yet we find that most members of Congress cannot even give a reason why we're in Iraq and Libya and Afghanistan. But having said that, let's face it, it would be ridiculous to assume that I'm making an appeal for Democrats when what I'm talking about is those people who are vulnerable. When, because of flaws in our financial center, caused people to lose their homes, it wasn't just Democrats. There were Democrats, Republicans, Independents, and those that have no faith in government that woke up in the morning, they've lost their jobs, they lost their home, they lost their pension funds, they lost their savings, they had to pull their kids out of school, they lost their self-esteem, some lost their homes. I don't remember anywhere where we're talking about people that are registered Democrats. These are Americans that expected more from their government than just saying that we will be able to address your needs in the by and by. And the very people that are aged, God knows we're not talking about a party label. When we talk about our sick, when we talk about Medicaid, when we talk about Medicare, when we talk about Social Security, how in God's name can we say we're just talking about Democrats? No, we're talking about all Americans that invested in this country that now see that some of them are so hopeless. We had hoped that we would deal with the debt ceiling, which gives the president the ability to say when American borrows, America pays back. We thought that the integrity of our great country would never be challenged, certainly by members of the Congress. But that's not the case. The president's being held hostage, and what's being held hostage is the budget. On the other side of the issue is the question of taxes. So it appears to me that wherever you find the vulnerable, somebody should be protecting them, since the lobbyist is not knocking on the door saying protect the poor. And this is a great opportunity, since the president is being hostage, that we can reform some of the things that we wanted to do, whether it's the tax system, Medicare, Social Security, but these things are supposed to go through a process. I was honored to chair the Ways and Means Committee, which constitutionally deals with all tax issues, all fiscal issues. It deals with trade, it deals with Medicare, it deals with Social Security, and it deals with taxes. So you wake up in the morning and you find out that the Congress, 435 of us, who now have this important decision to make as we hopefully move forward after the deadline of August the 2nd, and the Senate are to decide these questions by the Gang of Six. Well, I'll be back, because no longer am I making an appeal for the Congress. God bless the Gang of Six in trying to save this great nation.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Pompeo, for 5 minutes. Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last night, this body passed a piece of legislation that takes a first good step towards fixing America's spending problem, towards taking on our spending addiction and addressing the enormous deficits and debt that our nation faces. But we all know there's a second component to making sure that we solve this deficit and debt crisis, and that's economic growth. It's jobs. It's allowing the American entrepreneur, the American consumer to have affordable products, and in the case of Kansas, the American farmer and agriculture producer to survive, to continue to do the things that they need to do to feed the world. Now, I've been in Congress just 6 months now, and I've watched this administration's Environmental Protection Agency act with respect to our agriculture community with radical indifference or worse, outright hostility. These are folks who are providing affordable food for our entire world. And yet this administration seeks to regulate it. It seeks to harass it. It seeks to impose burdens which will cause this great source of wealth for our nation to leave. And I want to talk about that because it's so important for the growth of our nation and the success of our nation to continue to have that industry thrive. And I want to talk about some of the things I've seen in just these 6 months. You know, the American farmer needs energy. The American farmer needs affordable energy. In this morning's Wichita Eagle, our primary utility in western Kansas and south central Kansas said that the utility rules that this administration is about to impose will put them in a place where they cannot comply. Now, I'm not talking about increased costs. We know that this administration has driven higher electricity rates. We're talking about a utility that will not be able to comply with a set of regulations this administration is putting in place. That's not good for the agriculture community in Kansas. They rely on affordable energy. The examples go on. This administration, under the Clean Air Act, has attempted to regulate dust. Now, I don't know about folks that live out further this way, but in Kansas on a dry day like today when it's 110 degrees, there's a little bit of dust when you drive your truck down the road. And yet they want to say, no, that's a regulated particulate matter. Where's the common sense? Today they're changing the clean air rules to take a set of chemicals that are already regulated under a set of regulations that have been in existence for decades and say, no, we want to add another layer. We want you to now have to be permitted to have these chemicals that have already been demonstrated to be safe in their use in agricultural production. We've seen what they've tried to do with greenhouse gas regulation as well. We saw this body respond by not giving the President cap and trade, and I'm thankful for that. But we've now got an Environmental Protection Agency that's trying to do the same through regulatory fiat. And now the Department of Transportation is chiming in as well, trying to regulate trucks, farm equipment, under rules that are normally intended for cross-country truckers, and trying to regulate them in the same way, putting an additional burden on the agricultural community that has been operating their farm equipment in south central Kansas in an incredibly safe way for decades. I hope that this administration will reconsider. We cannot continue to drive cost. We cannot continue to regulate the Kansas agricultural community. We cannot harass it into its leaving our country. We know this is important. If we drive up the cost of food, we'll drive up inflation. That's good for no one. I hope this administration will reconsider, that they'll use some common sense. Our farmers, our agriculture producers want clean air. They make it happen. They need clean water. They ensure that it happens every day. We do not need this administration to harass them into leaving the very profession that is so important to our country. And with that, I yield back my time.
Chair recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Woolsey, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I'm here catching my breath after the debate over the extreme Tea Party legislation that we considered yesterday. It's easily one of the worst bills I can remember in nearly 20 years of service here in this body. Every time I think they can't possibly go any farther, the majority blows me away with the audacity of their proposals and the cruelty of their priorities. H.R. 2560, yesterday's debt ceiling proposal, almost makes the Ryan budget look progressive. It makes the continuing resolution passed back in April look positively generous. On this side of the aisle, we call it the cap the cut, cap, and end Medicare plan, which is completely accurate. But I'm going to give it another name today: cut, cap, and continue wars. Because throughout the debate over the debt ceiling, there's been an elephant in the room, if you'll pardon the expression, that hardly anyone is willing to acknowledge. And that is the impact of waging not one, not two, but 3 wars is having on our nation's fiscal health. Afghanistan alone is costing $10 billion a month, with the total price tag for Iraq and Afghanistan going back 10 years, $3.2 trillion. And that's a conservative estimate, Mr. Speaker. These are staggering figures, especially during a recession, when Americans are crying out for Washington to do something about creating jobs and breathing life back into our economy. And what are the taxpayers getting for their trillions of dollars in war spending? More than 6,100 dead Americans, continued violence in Iraq, and a prime minister who's cozying up to Iran, and an ongoing civil war in Libya, a corrupt regime in Kabul, insurgents that continue to kill at will. In Afghanistan, a nation still under crushing poverty, and an Afghan government that cannot protect its own people. By any measure, these wars have been a devastating failure. And yet, with barely any scrutiny, barely any debate, and certainly no outrage from Republican leaders, we continue to write that check. Meanwhile, we have domestic programs at work, proven investments in the survival and prosperity of our people: Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, school lunches, student loans, food stamps, unemployment insurance. But the majority says these programs have to be cut and capped so we can continue 3 wars. Republicans want to cut programs that are keeping Americans alive, while they want to continue funding the wars that have killed more than 6,100 Americans. It blows my mind, Mr. Speaker. How about we ask the American people, which do they prefer? These wars that have been failing us for 10 years? Or the guaranteed Medicare benefits that will allow them and their families to retire with dignity? I ask my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, do you really believe everything should be on the table? Everything. And if you do, let's talk about war spending. And if you're really and truly serious about restoring fiscal sanity, where were you when the Congressional Progressive Caucus released a plan that would put us back in the black within 10 years? The Congressional Progressive Caucus budget proves that we can balance the budget, but we don't have to amend the Constitution to do it. We don't need to shred the safety net to do it. We don't need to tear the heart out of Medicare to do it. We can do it by bringing fairness back to the tax code, by ending subsidies, handouts, and giveaways to people and corporations who will do just fine without them. We can do it by passing a clean debt ceiling and putting our people to work. And, Mr. Speaker, we can do it by ending these wars once and for all and bringing our troops home where they belong. I yield back.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Conseco, for 5 minutes.
I rise to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, there are many concerns on the minds of Americans today. But there's one concern that dominates discussion in every coffee shop, grocery store, barber shop, civic clubs, or everywhere else that Americans gather, and that is the need to turn our economy around and create jobs. The American people are right to be concerned about the economy and jobs. We've had 29 straight months with the unemployment rate at 8% or higher, the longest streak since the Great Depression. 14 million Americans are unemployed, and month after month the jobs reports show anemic job growth. Over 2 years ago, the American people were told by President Obama and other Washington liberals that if we just spend over $1 trillion on the so-called stimulus bill, that the unemployment rate would not exceed 8%. Well, In the entire Obama presidency, there has only been 1 month, January of 2009, that the unemployment rate did not exceed 8%. Every month since the stimulus bill was signed into law in February of 2009 has seen unemployment rates at 8% or higher. It is clear that the approach of attempting to spend and borrow our way to a better economy has not worked. That's why Congress needs to look to policies that will create jobs, like passing the 3 pending free trade agreements our nation has with Colombia, Panama, and South Korea. Beyond the fact that the Business Roundtable estimates these agreements will create more than 250,000 jobs and are important for our economy, these agreements are also important for the United States' role in the world. There's no better illustration of this than the agreement we have pending with Colombia. Colombia is an important ally in Latin America, and I do say that today is celebrate Colombian Independence Day. They are serving as an example for other nations, and in stark contrast to the dictatorial regimes in Venezuela, Cuba, and Bolivia. Colombia should not only enjoy a strategic relationship with the United States, we should also enjoy a strong commercial relationship. Passage of the Free Trade Agreement would build upon the existing relationship and further strengthen it. Apart from being beneficial for an important ally, this agreement is important for the U.S. economy. Here are just a few of the benefits that will occur with passage of the Colombia Free Trade Agreement. Duty-free access to the Colombian market for more than 80% of U.S. consumer and industrial goods exports, with remaining tariff phased out in 10 years. Immediate duty-free access to more than 2/3 of current U.S. agricultural exports, with the remaining tariffs phased out over time. Strengthened intellectual property and investor protections, open service market, and enhanced transparency in government procurement. However, perhaps the most important reason to pass this agreement is that if we don't, our competitors will. Our competitors worldwide are aggressively moving to pass trade agreements. We've already seen our market share in Colombia jeopardized. For instance, although Colombia has doubled its agricultural imports over the past 5 years, the U.S. has seen its market share shrink by 1/2. In 2008, American farmers held a 46% share of the Colombian market. Today, that share has diminished to 21%. In 2000, China was Colombia's 12th largest trading partner. Today, China is the 2nd biggest trade partner for Colombia, behind the United States. Failure to pass the Free Trade Agreement will allow our competitors to enjoy an artificial advantage. At this point in our economy, why do we not want to do everything we can to keep the jobs we have and create new ones? We need to put the politics aside and recognize the importance of the Colombian Free Trade Agreement, not only for our economy, but for our strategic interests. It's time to pass the Colombian Free Trade Agreement, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. DeFazio, for 5 minutes.
Well, yesterday the so-called Gang of Six on the Senate side, 6 very important senators, unveiled sort of an outline about how to save $4 trillion over the next 10 years. Immediately was embraced by President Obama. We really don't know much about it, nor does he, but he immediately embraced it. We know one thing about it. It contains something called a chained CPI. Okay, well, who cares about a chained CPI? Well, seniors, they care a lot about a chained CPI. Middle-income taxpayers, they care about it. They don't know it yet. Veterans, and a whole host of other people. What is a chained CPI? Well, the pointy heads like Mr. Furman, who worked for President Obama, say, we're understating and overstating inflation with the way we adjust. So there's something called substitution effect. So when prices of things go up, you buy something cheaper, so that means there isn't inflation. Well, no, wait a minute, the thing you used to buy is still more expensive and you're buying something else. Yeah, but this, in the pointy-head economics world, this makes sense. So let's say how this would work for someone on Medicare. Okay, you can't afford your heart bypass, so instead you'll say to the doc, hey, look, I can't afford the copay on the heart bypass. Why don't you do a hernia instead? That's substitution in Mr. Furman's world. This makes sense. Now, what this would do to seniors on Social Security, we already understate inflation. Seniors haven't gotten a COLA for the last 2 years. Tell me the price of prescription drugs and medical care hasn't gone up over the last 2 years. We need, in fact, a different measure for seniors, for Medicare, for our veterans and others who consume more health care and more essentials, which the CPI doesn't measure. It just measures junk that people buy. That's all it measures. And they're saying because people buy cheaper junk, we should change the CPI. That means the senior, by the time they reach 85 on this brave new world of the changed CPI, will get $100 less a month in their Social Security. Not too good. Veterans would see their benefits also be restrained and go down about the same amount. And then there's this other little impact they're not mentioning. If you're earning $20,000 a year, the tax brackets get adjusted every year. Well, they wouldn't get adjusted so much anymore under the changed CPI. So someone who earns $20,000 a year over 10 years would see their taxes go up 14%. But guess what? For the rich people, you're in $500,000 a year, you're already at the top. Their taxes will only go up 0.3%, 0.3%. 14% for someone who earns $20,000 a year, 0.3% for someone who earns $500,000. And Obama has embraced this? What's happened down there at the White House? They're listening to these pointy-head economists, and they're going after programs that are important to the American people. All of this, all combined of this great gang of six, would save $4 trillion over 10 years. That is, seniors will pay more, working people will pay more, veterans will pay more, rich people, not so much, but would save $4 trillion. Guess what? If we let all the Bush tax cuts expire at the end of next year, all of them, and the stupid Social Security tax holiday, that would be $5 trillion over 10 years, and we wouldn't have cut Social Security. We wouldn't have cut veterans' benefits. We wouldn't have asked low-income and middle-income people to pay more in taxes. Now, does that make more sense? I think so. Let's hope they rethink this down at the White House, and I hope the American people are watching closely.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Moran.
Thank you, Mr.
For 5
Chairman.
minutes.
Last night, we were asked to amend the Constitution after 2¼ centuries in a way that will permanently limit the ability of our government to foster competitiveness in a global economy, to generate greater equality of opportunity, to treat our seniors with dignity and respect, and to defend and define this great nation as an ever-shining democratic beacon of hope and prosperity. So I was proud to vote against the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act. It is the House Republicans' vision for America's future. This is a vision in which the country turns its back on the achievements of the last century and chooses not to invest in meeting the challenges of the next century. The Republicans aim to use a crisis of their own making to hamstring future Congresses, limiting our ability to make necessary infrastructure investments, to care for the poor, aged, and disabled, and to respond to national and international crises. The 18% spending cap mandated by the bill would return the government to spending levels not seen since the establishment of Medicare and Medicaid. The impending retirement of more than 70 million baby boomers means that these spending levels are woefully inadequate unless we condemn our grandparents to a severely diminished quality of life. The Republican Party would enshrine constitutional protections for tax cuts and loopholes for wealthy individuals and corporations, requiring an unattainable two-thirds majority in both the House and the Senate for the government to increase the currently unsustainably low revenue levels of roughly 15% of GDP. This would necessarily result in unprecedented cuts in student loans and grants, transportation, education, environmental protection, law enforcement, in other words, the physical and the human infrastructure of our economy. The only budget plan that comes close to meeting the requirements of these constitutional amendments is the Republican Study Committee budget, which eliminates 70% of non-defense discretionary funding by 2021, contains deep cuts to Medicare, cuts Medicaid, food stamps, supplemental security income for the elderly and disabled poor in half by the end of the decade, and raises the Social Security retirement age to 70 years of age. Yesterday's vote means the Republican majority is demanding that in return for avoiding an economically disastrous default on our debt, we make $111 billion in immediate spending cuts. These cuts seriously increase the likelihood of a double-dip recession. It's estimated that they could cause the loss of more than 1 million public sector jobs just in the next year alone. Last month, the economy added an anemic 18,000 jobs, but in fact, the private sector added 57,000 jobs, while 39,000 public sector jobs were lost, in addition to the 49,000 public sector jobs lost in the prior month. This is a continuing trend. 500,000 public sector employees have now lost their jobs, 200,000 of them teachers, while student enrollment has increased by 750,000. Firing more government workers will only decrease aggregate demand, making it that much harder to sustain the recovery. We've witnessed this before. In 1937, President Roosevelt responded to similar conservative pressure by substantially reducing federal spending before the Great Depression was fully in the rearview mirror. It drove us right back into economic depression. The economy wouldn't recover until the increased spending and hiring that accompanied the World War II armaments buildup got the country moving again. And after the war, spending on education and housing for our GIs, the Marshall Plan for Europe, and the construction of the interstate highway system established a permanent middle class and sustainable prosperity. This is not the time for the Democratic Party to sacrifice our values, values held by a majority of the American people, even in the face of opposition that has reached unprecedented levels of ideological radicalization. We have to address our long-term deficits for the sake of future generations, but we must do so in a balanced manner, combining rational spending cuts and increased revenue. That's what's worked in the past. That's what we need to do now. We must not abandon not only the people that depend upon the government for their quality of life, but we must not let this great nation become a second-class society and a third-rate economy. And if a bill that was passed last night were to be enacted into law, that's exactly what it would do. That's why I was proud to vote against it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Farr, for 5 minutes. Without objection. Without objection.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to clarify a mischaracterization of the administrative costs of the Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, commonly known as WIC. It's interesting, you can come down here on the floor or speak in committee, and we're protected as members of Congress to say anything we want. It doesn't require that we have to say everything to be factually correct. And sometimes those mischaracterizations, misstatements get into the record. And in this case, the complaint or the statement in subcommittee and full committee, and even in debate here on the floor of the Agricultural Appropriations Bill, it was assertive that the administrative costs in this program are up to 40% of the total costs of WIC. This is a misstatement of fact, although it was included in the report language and it was adopted by the committee. So I come today to point out that the 40% administrative costs claimed by the majority are based on selected data from a 2008 Brookings Institute report. It didn't come from the Department of Agriculture, which administers the program. The Brookings report collapsed several legislative mandated non-monetary programs, including the education of nutrition, the requirement that we support and inform people on how to do proper breastfeeding, other client services, issues like health care referrals, even immunization screenings. These were counted as administrative costs when they're mandated by us in Congress to be carried out. They're programmatic costs. And it wasn't proper for the Brookings report to include those as administrative costs. Breastfeeding, nutrition education, immunization screening are vital programs which improve birth outcomes and reduce the incidence of health problems for WIC participants. They should not be categorized as administrative costs for the purpose of budgeting. So today, I'd like to point out that in a recent letter to our Committee on Agricultural Appropriations, of which I'm the ranking member, from our Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Vilsack, and I'm including this letter in this comments today. He notes that the Food and Nutrition Service delivers its program management and actual administrative costs at a steady 9.09% rate, far less than the 40% purported in the Brookings Institute and included in the committee report. WIC is effective in improving the health of pregnant women, new mothers, and their infants. And I feel it is important to clarify that the WIC program is meeting its mission, it's meeting the law, to safeguard the health of low-income women, infants, and children who are at nutrition risk by providing nutritional food and supplemental diets and information on healthy eating and referrals to other health care services. As members of Congress, we should not do the program any further disservice by erroneous figures being included in the report. So today, Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert in the record the letters from Secretary Vilsack pointing this out and to make the record clear that the WIC program is indeed being administered very soundly and fiscally conservatively. Thank you very much. I yield back the remainder of my time.
The Chair recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Spear, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, for the last few months I've come to this floor every week to talk about a moral black eye on this country, the issue of rape and sexual assault in the military. I've mentioned the fact that the Pentagon has estimated that 19,000 service members are raped or sexually assaulted each and every year. The victims typically are blamed and the assailants are promoted. And I've shared the personal stories of several women who needed to have a bright light shined on this ongoing epidemic. But it's not only females in the military that are victims. Men are being victimized as well. In an April 2011 article entitled "The Military Secret Shame," Newsweek looked at the subject that hardly anyone talks about: male-on-male rape and sexual assault. Mr. Speaker, it is time to break this silence. Last year, nearly 50,000 male veterans screened positive for, quote, military sexual trauma, unquote. Think about that, 50,000 men. That's nearly double what it was in 2003. Another 110 men made confidential reports of sexual assault by other men, nearly 3 times what it was in 2007. We know the number of actual victims is much higher. The latest Department of Defense report showed that only 13% of those who are raped in the military actually report them. Men keep quiet for the same reasons women do: a military system that gives them virtually no chance of justice. In 2010, the Pentagon anonymously asked active duty soldiers who had been sexually assaulted why they did not report their attacks. Half of them said they didn't want anyone to know. A third of them said they didn't think anything would be done. And 30% said they were afraid of retaliation or reprisals. I now want to share with you the story of Blake Stevens. I warn you that some of the material is graphic. Stevens joined the Army in 2001. The verbal and physical attacks started